So thank you all for your time and attention this evening. Let's get into what we're here to talk about. Buddhism. What is Buddhism? Well, Buddhism is practiced by over 500 million people worldwide, yet it is not centered on a god or a creator. Instead, it focuses on personal spiritual development, the nature of suffering, and the path to enlightenment through wisdom, ethical conduct, and meditation, with a diverse range of teachings, practices, and traditions. Anyone, regardless of religious background, can practice the teachings of Buddhism without converting. Interestingly, there may be health benefits to practicing Buddhism. It's true. Meditation, as we have just mentioned, and mindfulness, two central practices of Buddhism, have been scientifically linked with reduced stress and anxiety, improved emotional regulation, reduced symptoms of depression, enhanced attention and focus, slower brain aging, lower blood pressure, heart health, strengthened immune system, pain reduction, increased compassion and altruism, as well as reduced addictive behaviors. Have I got your attention? Well, great. I'll include the scientific studies performed for each of the above claims in the work cited towards the end. So then what is Buddhism all about? We do have a substantial amount of information to get through, and it may likely take close to our full hour. So please hold your questions again until the end, and I'll try to finish with as much brevity as possible. So let's begin. Let us start with a thought exercise. Imagine you are learning how to ride a bicycle. You try and you try and you try, at first always tipping over and falling down, with each tumble and each injury preventing the desire from coming to fruition for the self for a while. But we keep trying until finally something clicks. When you try this time, you just get a little further than you ever had gone before. And then before you know it, you are riding upright, building speed. Ultimately, you have done it. Now free from the pain of learning and forever in the joy of riding. So now that you've learned how, you can choose to ride alone forever, happy in your own ability, or you can dedicate your life to teaching others how to ride a bike, never riding your own until all others on earth can ride. Maybe you help invent training wheels in some form for others. That initial feeling of being stuck and unable to ride your bike, seeking an end to this cycle of suffering and failing, and finally learning how to ride your bike is analogous to the concept of samsara and nirvana. You may remember from our Hinduism lecture the concept of samsara, which is the cycle of life, death, and rebirth that all living things are trapped in. But Buddhists say there is a way out, a path to enlightenment or nirvana. In Hinduism, this is known as moksha, which you may remember. Sometimes we find it on our own. Sometimes we must trust a friend who has already ridden his bike before us. These trusted teachers are known in Buddhism as bodhisattvas, or Buddhas to be, which, to use our analogy, means one who knows how to ride a bike, but stays back in order to help others ride their bike, only ever riding a bike themselves once every other living person has the ability. But what if your goal was more complex than riding a bike? What if this took lifetimes to learn how to finish the task at hand? So to answer these questions, we must understand what Buddhism is at its core. At its core, Buddhism is a system which focuses on the elimination of dukkha, or suffering, achieved through following Buddhist teachings called the Dharma. The Dharma lays out the path to nirvana, which is also called nibbana in Pali, or enlightenment. We study the Pali and the Sanskrit because the primary language of Buddhism is Sanskrit, but Pali is also used by all Theravada Buddhists, which we'll cover in just a little. And the central text of Buddhism, the Pali Canon, is also in Pali. So nirvana or nibbana literally means blowing out like a candle. You can see the image to the right bottom. Those who achieve nirvana or nibbana are free from the ceaseless flickering of suffering found throughout the cycle of samsara. Remember moksha in Hinduism. But what is nirvana? This is quite a difficult question. According to Buddhism, nirvana or nibbana is not a physical place or heaven, but a state of profound liberation. It is the extinguishing of greed, hatred, or greed, hatred, or delusion, leading to ultimate peace and freedom from the cycle of birth and death. Descriptively, nirvana is permanent, stable, imperishable, immovable, ageless, deathless, unborn, and unbecome. It is power, bliss, and happiness, the secure refuge, the shelter, and the place of unassailable safety. The Buddha says, "There is, O monks, an unborn, neither become, nor created, nor formed. Were there not, there would be no deliverance from the formed, the made, the compounded." Buddha could not describe nirvana, insisting that it was incomprehensible, indescribable, inconceivable, inutterable, ineffable. For after we eliminate every aspect of the only consciousness we have known, how can we speak of what is left? One of Buddha's heirs, Nagasena, used the analogy of wind. Asked what nirvana is like, Nagasena asked his questioner to show him the wind. Show me its color and configuration, whether it is thick or it is thin, long or it is short. When the questioner protested, this was impossible. Nagasena asked rhetorically whether this was grounds for concluding that wind does not exist, stating, even so, there is nirvana, but it is not possible to show nirvana. The Buddha did assert bliss. Yes, bliss, my friends, is nirvana. It is dangerous to speculate on what nirvana is. It is better to know how to prepare the conditions necessary for nirvana, how to attain the inner peace and clarity of vision that leads to nirvana. Follow the Buddha's advice. Put his teachings into practice. Get rid of all your defilements, which are rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. Purify yourself of all desires and realize absolute selflessness. Lead a life of right moral conduct and constantly practice meditation. By active exertion, free yourself from all selfishness and illusion. Then nirvana is gained and experienced. So what was the Buddha's outlook on life? Well, the Buddha's total outlook is difficult to come by for three reasons. The first, that he did not commit his teaching to writing. The second being that a century and a half elapsed before the first written records appear. And the third being, when these first writings do appear, they pour forth in bewildering variety and number. In this way, perhaps scholars of Christianity may see similarities to another worldly savior. Buddhism has three central ideas known as the three jewels or treasures, which can help us seek that path to enlightenment or nirvana, nibbana. These three jewels or treasures are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The three jewels are central to many Buddhist practices, and many practitioners begin their daily rituals with the vow, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. If we imagine life as a river, separating the banks of ignorance from the shores of wisdom and enlightenment, with our spiritual selves floating atop the raft of our soul's experience across life's river, we can think of the above thus. I take refuge in the Buddha. There was an explorer who made this trip and proved that it can succeed. I take refuge in the Dharma, this ship to which we have committed our lives in this conviction that it is seaworthy. I take refuge in the Sangha, the order or crew that is navigating the ship, and in whom we have confidence in their guidance and company. What more can be said then about the first jewel or treasure, the Buddha? While the title of the Buddha, has been given to several people who have achieved enlightenment, when we talk about the Buddha, we are referring to Siddhartha Gautama, or Gautama. Siddhartha meaning he who achieves his goal, and Gautama meaning his family name. The Buddha is also known by other titles, one being Shakyamuni, which as a title carries profound significance and is made up of two Sanskrit words. Shakya, meaning the Shakya clan or tribe, which is a small republic in the Himalayan foothills to which Siddhartha belonged. And Muni, meaning sage or one who is silent, and is often used to describe someone who has attained spiritual self-realization. Thus, Shakyamuni translates to sage of the Shakyas. Another title utilized by the Buddha himself is Tathagata, meaning one who has thus come, or one who has thus gone. So who was Siddhartha Gautama? To answer this, let us go back to the beginning. Siddhartha was born around 563 BCE in what is now Nepal. His father ruled one of the petty kingdoms that comprised India then, so Siddhartha's upbringing was luxurious. He appears to have been exceptionally handsome, and at 16 married a neighboring princess, Yasudhara, who bore a son, Rahula. Here, in short, was a man who seemed to have everything: social standing, appearance, wealth, a model wife, a child, and a throne that he would soon inherit. Despite all of this, however, there settled over him a dark cloud that would lead him to abandon his lucky lot. The cause of his discontent is impounded in the legend of the 4 passing sights, represented in the bottom image on this slide. Before we examine these 4 passing sights, let us consider the circumstances surrounding the same. When Siddhartha was born, his father hired fortune tellers to discern his future. It was said that if he succeeded his father, the Buddha-to-be would unify India and become a world conqueror. But if he forsook the world, that he would become a world redeemer. His father wanted the former and spared no effort to keep his son on course. Palaces and dancing girls and the finest clothing were placed at his disposal, and orders were given that no unpleasantness should ever enter his life. One day, however, this order was neglected, and Siddhartha saw the first passing sight: an old man, gaunt, broken-toothed, trembling as he leaned on his staff. On another day, he saw the second passing sight: a body racked with disease lying by the roadside. On a third outing, he encountered the third passing sight: a corpse. Having thus discovered the facts of aging, disease, and death, he saw on a fourth ride the fourth passing sight: a monk with a shaven head, ochre robe, and bowl, and learned from him of a path that renounces the world. Once Siddhartha had perceived the inevitability of pain and passage, fleshly pleasures lost their charm, and he determined to follow the calling of a truth seeker. So after these 4 passing sights, what happened next? One night in his 29th year, Siddhartha effected his great going forth. Taking silent farewell to his sleeping wife and child, he mounted his great white steed and set off for a forest. Reaching its edge, he discarded his royal attire, he shaved his head, and he entered into the forest to seek enlightenment. 6 years followed, during which his energies were directed to several phases. The first, seeking out 2 of the foremost Hindu masters of the day and learning what he could from their tradition. His next step was to join a band of ascetics and give their way a try. Was his body holding him back? He would crush its interference. In every austerity, he outdid his teachers. While once trying to prove that he could last longer without food during a fast than a teacher, Siddhartha nearly died and was brought back to life with warm rice gruel. This experience taught Gautama the futility of asceticism and inspired what was to become the first constructive plank of his program, the principle of the middle way, between the extremes of asceticism and indulgence. Having renounced mortification, or the practice of deliberately causing oneself pain or difficulty to attain perfection, Gautama devoted the final phase of his quest to a combination of rigorous thought and mystic concentration along the lines of Hinduism's Raja Yoga. You may remember last presentation. Raja Yoga is a form of Hindu yoga intended to achieve control over mind and emotions. But Buddha developed this practice without attachment to the Hindu Atman, or the self. Feeling as though a breakthrough was near, he sat down one evening under what would become known as the Bo tree, short for Bodhi, or enlightenment. Vowing not to arise until he had gained his goal, which lasted nearly 7 weeks. Perhaps some of the audience can draw parallels to Odin and the Yggdrasil tree, where he stayed for 9 days to learn the secrets of wisdom. During this time, scenes reminiscent of Jesus in the desert came to be for the Buddha. Mara, the evil one who tempted Siddhartha with voluptuous women. When that failed, Mara sent torrents of flaming rocks, which turned into blossom petals once focused on by the sage. Mara challenged Gautama for seeking enlightenment in the way that he was, But Siddhartha touched the ground with his right fingertips, and the earth thundered, "I bear you witness," which caused Mara to flee. The world collapsed inside of the mind of Gautama and then re-emerged with the effulgence of true being. Gautama could see all of his previous lives and look into everyone else's life cycles too. This insight helped Gautama to uncover the final culmination of suffering known as the three poisons, which are represented here by a boar, snake, and a rooster. All right, so the three poisons are greed, hatred, and ignorance or superstition. The Great Awakening had arrived. Gautama was gone. Only the Buddha remained. Mara was waiting with one last temptation. How could the Buddha expect others to understand truth as profound as that which was discovered? Why not just wash his hands of the whole world, be done with the body, and slip at once into perpetual nirvana? The argument almost prevailed, but the Buddha said, "There will be some who understand," and Mara vanquished forever. The Buddha had uncovered the secret to fulfilled living, and he was ready to begin teaching. This encompassed an arduous ministry of 45 years, each year teaching for 9 months and retreating for 3. In 483 BC, at the age of 80, the Buddha died after eating poisonous mushrooms or spoiled pork prepared without malice by a disciple. We will circle back to the Buddha's death toward the end of the presentation. Please make sure we're muted. So what exactly did the Buddha teach during those 45 years of ministry? To understand the Buddha's ministry, let us move on to the second jewel or treasure, the Dharma. From the day of his enlightenment, the Buddha dedicated his life to creating a strategy to help others down this path between indulgence and restraint, which he called the middle way. Today, Buddhists follow the middle way by practicing the second treasure of the three jewels, the Dharma or the Dhamma in Pali. The Dharma or Dhamma refers to the teachings of the Buddha, encompassing the cosmic law and ethical principles that govern existence, the path to enlightenment, and the nature of reality, including the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So let's peel this rich and dense definition back a little. Made up of 4 noble truths, the Dharma comes from the Buddha's first formal sermon after enlightenment. The first truth, there is suffering. Remember the 4 passing sights. The Dhammapada, one of the most well-known Buddhist scriptures and a portion of the Pali Canon which translates to verses of the teaching, puts forth the following: "Lo, as the wind is, so is mortal life. A moan, a sigh, a sob, a storm, a strife." This is the concept of dukkha mentioned earlier, but suffering is not merely physical and emotional pain. Dukkha translates roughly to dissatisfaction, particularly about the state of the universe. The second truth, there is a cause or a tanha to suffering or dukkha. That cause is desire, or the desire for private fulfillment, or selfish desire, known as samudaya, meaning arising. Therefore, selfish desire causes our dissatisfaction. The third truth, there is an end to suffering, called nirodha, meaning cessation or extinction. The fourth truth, there is a path that leads to the end of suffering. This path is called the middle way, or marga, meaning path, which can be found when following the Eightfold Path. The next question we are led to ask then is, what is the Eightfold Path? So before we do that, look up at the top. There's the 4 Noble Truths, and below is a representation of the Eightfold Path that you can somewhat follow along. The next question, yes, what is the Eightfold Path? The Eightfold Path is a combination of 8 behaviors to guide one towards nirvana. The first is right knowledge, or right view, or right understanding. Specifically, the right view of the 4 Noble Truths, karma, and reality. The second is right intention, or thought, or aspiration. This encompasses positivity over negativity in our thoughts and avoiding ill will, attachment, hatred, or harmful desires. The third is right speech, refraining from lying, gossip, harsh words, and idle chatter, speaking truthfully. The fourth is right action or behavior, acting morally and ethically avoiding harming others, and acting compassionately. The fifth is right livelihood, pursuing a livelihood which aligns with principles and contributes positively to society, avoiding those which cause harm to others or the environment. The sixth is right effort, actively working towards positive liberation and abandoning negative states of mind. The seventh is right mindfulness, being fully present and aware of body, feelings, thought, and the existing world in each moment while practicing meditation and viewing the present with non-attachment. And the eighth and final is right concentration or absorption, developing focused attention, achieving a state of mental tranquility and clarity, as in Hindu Raja Yoga. So what does the Buddha say about those who follow the way? The Buddha says, those who follow the way might well follow the example of an ox that marches through a deep mire carrying a heavy load. He is tired, but his steady, forward-looking gaze will not relax until he comes out of the mire. Only then does the ox relax. All right. Okay. Oh, monks, remember that passion and sin are more than the filthy mire, and that you can escape misery only by earnestly and steadfastly persevering in the way. The Dhammapada expands further. There is no fire like greed, no crime like hatred, no sorrow like separation, no sickness like hunger of heart, and no joy like the joy of freedom. Health, contentment, and trust are your greatest possessions, and freedom your greatest joy. Look within, be still, free from fear and attachment, know the sweet joy of living in the way. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you as your shadow, unshakable. How can a troubled mind understand the way? Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. But once mastered, no one can help you as much, not even your father or mother. What does the Dharma look like when actualized? Meditation, in the past reserved for Buddhist monks and nuns, but not practiced by laymen. Donating money and clothing to nuns and monks since they live separate from worldliness. Chanting, spinning a prayer wheel, lighting a lamp in a temple, or making offerings to the Buddha. Direct actions like this are seen as beneficial to one's karma. You may remember from our last presentation on Hinduism. To Buddhists, karma connects one's actions to a system of cause and effect that ultimately impacts your place in the next cycle of samsara. Some Buddhists even perform what are called merit transfers, believing that the good karma they create in this life can be passed on to their dead relatives in order to help them inch closer to enlightenment. Huang Po, Zen master during the Tang dynasty, phrases it thus: by the Dharma is meant the heart, for there is no Dharma apart from the heart. Heart is no other than the Dharma, for there is no heart apart from the Dharma. There is only testimony of silence. It goes beyond thinking. Therefore, it is said that the Dharma cuts off the passage to words and puts an end to all forms of mental activity. The heart is the source, the pure Buddha nature that is inherent in all of us. When you have within yourself a deep insight into this, you immediately realize that all you need is there in perfection and in abundance, and nothing is at all wanting or lacking in you. So we have heard of the Dharma, but with whom do we study and practice living the Dharma? Finally, for the three jewels, we'll come to the third jewel or treasure, which is the Sangha, which refers to the monks and nuns who continue to spread the Buddha's teachings in the microcosm, while in the macrocosm, the Sangha can also refer to the larger community of all people who take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma. The Sangha can include a number of different branches of practice and belief. Within the concept of the Sangha, we find the two main schools of Buddhist thought, Hinayana or Theravada and Mahayana. These names translate to Hinayana means little raft or lesser vehicle, Theravada means the way of the elders, and those two are the same practice, while Mahayana means the big raft or great vehicle. So Hinayana and Theravada both refer to the same group, as I just said, but Theravada Buddhism prefers to be known not as Hinayana, as that title carries a negative connotation and was bestowed by later Mahayana Buddhists. So the imagery of a raft can be understood by imagining one shore is ignorance and one shore is wisdom, with the river of life between the two banks. As we said earlier, Theravada and Hinayana concerns itself with a small raft for only the individual practitioner to cross. And once on the other side, the practitioner gets off the raft and enjoys nirvana. Mahayana can be imagined as those who have been capable of attaining nirvana and getting to that shore of wisdom, but they forsake the destination and work to build the largest possible raft to aid all future seekers across the river, never stepping foot on the banks of nirvana themselves. So broadly speaking, Theravada, which is also called Hinayana, works off of the Buddhist text, the Pali Canon, centering around the Buddha's teachings. Buddha says, work out your own salvation with diligence. And so the Theravadists are mainly concerned with the enlightenment of the self above all else. Theravada practitioners believe that they are practicing the original Buddha's teachings most closely and believe that Buddhism is a full-time job and encourage all members to become monks. In Theravada, it is up to the individual to get oneself over the humps. Their writing tells us that no one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must tread the path. Buddhas only show the way. Mahayana practitioners prefer to believe it is a field phenomenon. Their writings tell us that he findeth not who seeks his own. The soul is lost that's saved alone. So Mahayana practitioners believe Buddhism is not reserved solely for monks, but is as relevant for lay persons as for professionals. Mahayana places compassion, known as karuna, above individual wisdom, known as bodhi, with practitioners seeking help from compassionate Buddhas, known as bodhisattvas, and their practice seeks to enlighten others above all else. The difference between the two types is illustrated in the story of four men who, crossing a desert, come upon a compound surrounded by high walls. One of the four scales the wall, and on reaching the top gives a whoop of delight and jumps over. The second and third do likewise. These are the Theravada or Hinayana practitioners. When the fourth man gets to the top of the wall and sees a garden with streams and fruit trees, he remembers other wayfarers and climbs down to report the oasis to them. This is Mahayana Buddhism. The fourth would be called a bodhisattva, or a person who vows not to enter nirvana until the grass itself is enlightened. And this is the way of the Mahayana or the Great Raft. So how are these two main schools of Buddhism similar? While Theravada Buddhism is a precursor to Mahayana Buddhism, both schools accept the Buddha as the teacher. They both view the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path in the same light. And they both reject the idea of a supreme being who created and governs the world, among other similarities. Theravadan countries include Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, and Cambodia. Mahayanist countries include Korea, Japan, and Tibet. The three main bodhisattvas in Mahayana Buddhism are Avalokiteshvara, or Avalokiteshvara, who represents divine compassion, Manjushri, who represents divine wisdom, and Vajrapani, who represents divine power. You can see them on the top of the slide before you. In Freemasonry, our three pillars are wisdom, strength, and beauty. Perhaps you can see the parallels. In Buddhism, mantras are sacred words, phrases, or syllables that are chanted or repeated to help focus the mind, to learn Buddhist teachings, and encourage enlightenment. Remember the Hinduism lecture. The mantra of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of divine compassion, is Om Mani Padme Hum, meaning praise be to the jewel in the lotus. In Tibetan Buddhism, which we will discuss shortly, this is the most ubiquitous mantra, and its recitation is a popular form of religious practice, performed by laypersons and monastics alike. It is also an ever-present feature of the landscape, commonly carved onto rocks known as mani stones, painted onto the sides of hills, or else written on prayer flags and prayer wheels. Om Mani Padme Hum. Tara, who's represented at the bottom left, is the feminine counterpart to Avalokiteshvara. Tara is a Buddhist goddess of compassion, wisdom, and enlightenment. She is a savior who helps people achieve nirvana and is especially revered in Vajrayana Mahayana Buddhism, which we'll touch on in a second. Her mantra is Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha, or Om Tare Tutare Ture Swaha, which means, I prostrate to the liberator of Samsara, mother of all the victorious ones. As we will discuss shortly, the Dalai Lama is seen as an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of divine compassion. The Flower Ornament Sutra describes the Bodhisattva thus: the Bodhisattva comes where an all-embracing love abides, because he or she desires to discipline all beings. He or she comes where there is a great compassionate heart, because he or she desires to protect all beings against suffering. He or she comes out of the skillful means born of transcendental knowledge, because he or she is ever in conformity with the mentalities of all beings. All that appears is like a reflection. Let us now briefly discuss two forms of Mahayana Buddhism, of which one may have heard or may encounter in their own practices: Zen Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism. Now, Zen Buddhism is profoundly influenced by Chinese philosophy and religion of Taoism. Vajrayana Buddhism evolved in Tibet and is incredibly rich in symbolism, with the most well-known practitioner being the Dalai Lama. More on this in a few minutes. But first, what is Zen Buddhism? I'm going to give a non-answer to answer this, but hopefully all can discern what I mean. Zen Buddhism is like stepping through Alice's looking glass. One finds oneself in a topsy-turvy wonderland where everything seems quite mad, charmingly mad for the most part, but mad all the same. It is a world of bewildering dialogues, obscure conundrums, stunning paradoxes, flagrant contradictions, and abrupt non sequiturs, all carried off in the most urbane, cheerful, and innocent style imaginable. Zen can be embodied in the following examples. Buddha's flower sermon. While standing on a mountain with his disciples around him, the Buddha did not on this occasion resort to words. He simply held aloft a golden lotus. No one understood the meaning of this eloquent gesture save one student, whose quiet smile indicated that he had gotten the point and caused the Buddha to appoint him his successor. Whenever a certain Zen master was asked about the meaning of Zen, one lifted his index finger. That was all. Another kicked a ball. Still another slapped the inquirer. A novice who makes a respectful allusion to the Buddha is ordered to rinse his mouth and never utter that dirty word again. A group of Zen masters gathered for conversation have a great time declaring that there is no such thing as Buddhism or enlightenment or anything even remotely resembling nirvana. They set traps for one another, trying to trick someone into an assertion that might imply the opposite. But practiced as they are, they always elude these traps, whereupon the entire company bursts into glorious, room-shaking laughter. From the Zen perspective, reason is too short a ladder to reach truth's full heights. As one Zen adept stated, when Zen realization is achieved, never again can one feel that one's individual death brings an end to life. One has lived from an endless past and will live into an endless future. To read more on Zen Buddhism, Alan Watts wrote a book called The Spirit of Zen and The Way of Zen, which do a pretty good comprehensive job of pointing people towards the direction of Zen. So what is Vajrayana Buddhism? Vajrayana translates, it's another form of Mahayana Buddhism, and it translates to the diamond way or the diamond raft. In the oldest Hindu text, the Rig Veda, Indra wields a Vajra, which is a powerful weapon often described as a thunderbolt. This is a Vajra. This legendary and ritualistic tool symbolizes the proportions of a diamond indestructibility and a thunderbolt, irresistible force. Vajrayana incorporates esoteric or tantric practices, mantra chanting, deity visualization, and ritual to accelerate enlightenment. Vajrayana is unique in that Vajrayana practitioners believe that one can attain enlightenment in one lifetime, and it may strike one like a lightning bolt. Tibetan Buddhism is a branch of Vajrayana Buddhism that is so closely related that the names are often used interchangeably. on this point. Reginald A. Ray, who is a professor of Buddhist studies at Naropa University, states that the very culture of Tibet itself was permeated by the Vajrayana. Even the social, political, and religious institutions in Tibet were, to a large extent, expressions of a Vajrayana Buddhist outlook. It is true then that one needs to study Tibet in order to find out about Vajrayana, but it is equally true that one needs to study Vajrayana in order to understand the Tibetans and their culture. Within the confines of Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism, the concept of Shambhala is often described as a mythical kingdom hidden somewhere in the Himalayas, and it is viewed as a place of peace, harmony, and enlightenment, where its inhabitants live in accordance with the principles of compassion and wisdom. The essence of Vajrayana is Tantra, which has two Sanskrit roots. Tanoti, meaning to weave, to expand, to stretch, to extend, and Trayati, meaning to liberate or to free. Combined, Tantra means to expand one's awareness and experience of everything, to extend the frontiers of apprehension beyond the material, and hence to attain spiritual knowledge and liberation. The energy that interests the West most is sex. So it is not surprising that Tantra is best known abroad for its sacramental use of this force. What distinguishes Tantra in the way it wholeheartedly espouses sex as a spiritual ally, working with it intentionally and explicitly? Some may be familiar with the Tibetan Buddhist symbol of Yabyum, which is at the lower left here, meaning father-mother in Tibetan, and representing the union of male and female and of wisdom and compassion. Mandalas at the upper right are symbols of Vajrayana Buddhism, which are geometric diagrams that represent the sacred realms of deities and are used to aid in spiritual enlightenment. Tankas, at the bottom right, are considered a symbol of Vajrayana Buddhism as they are a form of sacred art deeply rooted in the visual representation of Vajrayana teachings, often depicting deities and concepts central to this Buddhist practice, and used as a tool for meditation and visualization within the Vajrayana tradition. So, is Buddhism a philosophy or a religion? Could it be neither or both? To ask this, we have to ask another question. What is the mark of any religion? All religions, particularly the Hinduism from which Buddhism sprang in contrast against, contain the following 6 characteristics: authority, ritual, explanations, tradition, grace, and mystery. So let's work through these with Buddhism in mind. Buddhism does not believe in authority. The Buddha worked to break the Brahmins' monopoly on religion and challenge each to take responsibility for their own lives. The Buddha says, "Be lamps unto yourself." In Buddhism, there is no ritual. This goes back to no superstition or ignorance, with instead a focus on the demanding job of ego reduction. As far as explanations, the Buddha says, each must find it for themselves, and those who know must maintain a noble silence. The Buddha tells a parable thence. It is as if a man wounded by an arrow, thickly smeared with poison, were to say to his surgeon, "I will not have this arrow removed until I know who shot it, until I know his caste, his height, his color, where he comes from, the kind of bow the arrow was shot from, the wood of which the arrow shaft was made, and the species of bird whose feathers adorn the arrows." Verily, before these questions were settled, that man would have died. There are no traditions in Buddhism. Each is free to practice as they see fit contemporarily. The Buddha counseled his followers, do not go by what is handed down, nor by the authority of your traditional teachings. When you know of yourselves, these teachings are good or not, only then accept or reject them. There is no grace in Buddhism. What is meant by grace? Grace here means the belief and assurance that reality is on our side and can be counted on. In pre-Buddhist Hinduism, many had come to accept the round of birth and rebirth as unending, which was like resigning oneself to a sentence of hard labor that would never cease. The Buddha said that these fools who assume we can do nothing about our condition should be denied categorically. The Buddha says there is a path to the end of suffering. Tread it. Each individual must tread this path for him or herself. Those who relying upon themselves only, not looking for assistance to anyone besides themselves, it is they who will reach the topmost height. Finally, Buddha preached a religion devoid of mystery and the supernatural. He condemned all forms of divination, soothsaying, and forecasting. By this ye shall know that a man is not my disciple, that he tries to work a miracle. So is Buddhism a religion or not? As you can see on the slides below, scholarly opinion is torn. One image states that Buddhism is a religion and a philosophy. Another states Buddhism is between religion and philosophy. And yet another states more than a religion, a philosophy for life. While we often hope for black and white answers, we find that truth often appears to us in grayscale. So how does Buddhism view the soul? Let's buckle up. This is one of the most complex ideas. I'll try to make it succinct. The Buddha says that unlike Hinduism, the body has no soul, anatta, and that he denies a personal God. The soul, or atta, had come to signify, one, a spiritual substance which, in keeping with the dualistic positions in Hinduism, two, retains its separate identity forever. Buddha rejected both of those beliefs. The body houses no homunculus or ghostly wraith that animates and outlasts it. The Buddha, an authentic child of India, did not doubt that reincarnation was a fact, but he disagreed with his Brahmanic contemporaries about its conception. He did not believe the soul is some psychic pellet which migrated from body to body, generation to generation. His alternative view is captured using the image of a wave. Suppose we are in a boat and notice that a wave is approaching. Here it comes all right. When it reaches us, we rise for a moment and then descend when it passes. Eventually it breaks on the shore and is gone. What are we to make of this? We speak of it as a wave, but in a sense it is single. From the gentle swell, it sets it in motion to its crashing death on the beach. It is a single identifiable wave that runs its course. Yet at no two moments are the molecules identical. Nothing that is in my next incarnation will be identical with what is in me now, but I will still be me in the same way that the wave retained its identity while moving through successive stages. So while a wave appears to be a separate identity, it is actually just a temporary manifestation of the water. Our individual identities, therefore, are transient manifestations of a larger interconnected reality. What continues from life and unites them is a trajectory, a four-dimensional form, a causal chain of karmic propensities. Causal connection is solidly affirmed, but no entity, no physical or psychic substantial substrate passes from life to life. This denial of a substantial soul was only an aspect of Buddha's wider denial of substances of every sort. Verbs rather than nouns fit his worldview, for everything is in its process, everything is in change. If anyone's read David Cooper's book on mystical Judaism called God is a Verb, you may see similarities. Thus, we have discussed two of the three marks of existence or characteristics shared by everything in the natural world. Dukkha, the lack, which is suffering, a lack of permanent identity, which is anatta, and anicca, which is impermanence. All right. So together, the three marks of existence are suffering, a lack of a permanent identity, and the idea of impermanence. To underscore life's fleetingness, Buddha called the components of the human self skandhas, which are described as skeins that hang together as loosely as yarn, and the body as a heap. These skandhas include form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, and are described thus: as an inconsequential dream vanishes completely upon awakening, as stars go out in deference to the morning sun, so individual awareness will be eclipsed in the blazing light of total realization. So what does Buddhism teach regarding gender or racial differences? Buddhism, especially Mahayana, is egalitarian. With a breadth of view unparalleled in his age and infrequent in any, the Buddha insisted that women were as capable of reaching arahantship, or the state of enlightenment while living, as men. The Buddha ordained women as full monks called bhikkhunis, rather progressive for the times. The Buddha elevated the status of women by pointing out that a woman is a mother of man, and no person is worthy of greater reverence and veneration than one's mother. In Hinduism, we see this veneration mirrored in Aditi, the mother of the gods. Masatoshi Ueki, Japanese Buddhist scholar, investigated gender equality in Buddhist literature and found Shakyamuni's teachings make no distinction regarding woman's enlightenment, thus asserting general equality in Buddhism. The Buddha used the simile of ocean water to illustrate the harmony that can be experienced by different peoples who learn to cast aside their arrogance. Different rivers have different names. The water of the individual rivers all flow into the ocean and become ocean water. In a similar manner, all those who come from different communities and different castes must forget their differences and think of themselves only as human beings. The Buddha advised his followers not to bring forward any racial issue when it came to the practice of religion. People of all religions should not discriminate against groups of people by bringing forward their personal traditional ways of life. They should treat everyone equally. Unfortunately, followers of different religions create more discriminations and hostility toward other religious groups when performing their religious activities. Racial arrogance and the idea of religious exclusivity is a great hindrance to religion and spiritual progress. Given such a wide variety of approaches, interpretations, and goals of different religions adopted by mankind, it is useful for people not to hold dogmatic views about their religion, but to be open and tolerant of other religious views. The Buddha said, "One must not accept my teachings from reverence, but first try them as gold is tried by fire." The Buddha advises that any form of religion is proper if it contains the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. This shows that the Buddha did not want to form a particular religion. What he wanted was to reveal the ultimate truth of our life and the world. This method is not the property of Buddhists alone. This is universal truth. The Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path are considered universal truth because they address fundamental aspects of human experience and suffering that are relevant to all people, regardless of culture, religion, or background. Most people find it necessary to put forth arguments to prove validity of the religion that they are following. Some claim that their religion is the oldest, or some claim their religion is the newest and the latest. Some claim theirs has the most followers and therefore contains the truth. Yet none of these arguments are valid to establish the truth of religion. One can judge the value of a religion by using only common sense and understanding. Some traditions require man to be subservient to a greater power than himself, a power which controls his creation, his actions, and his final deliverance. The Buddha did not accept such powers. Rather, he assigned to man that very power by asserting that each man is his own creator, responsible for his own salvation. That is why it is said, "There is none so godless as the Buddha, and yet none so godlike." Buddhism gives the followers a great responsibility. A Buddhist cannot put the blame on an external power when evil befalls him, but he can face misfortune with equanimity because he knows that he has the power to extricate himself from all misery. As the Buddha was about to pass away at age 80, an occasion termed parinirvana, his disciples came from everywhere to be near him. And while the other disciples were constantly at his side and in deep sorrow over the expected loss of their master, a monk named Atadatta went into his cell and practiced meditation. The other monks, thinking that he was unconcerned about the welfare of the Buddha, were upset and reported the matter to the Buddha. The monk, however, addressed the Buddha thus: "Lord, as the Blessed One would be passing away soon, I thought the best way to honor the Blessed One would be by attaining arahantship, or one who achieves enlightenment during the lifetime of the Blessed One." The Buddha was pleased by this attitude in his conduct and said that one's spiritual welfare should not be abandoned for the sake of others. In this story is illustrated one of the most important aspects of Buddhism. A person must constantly be on alert to seek his own deliverance from samsara, and his salvation must be brought about by the individual himself. He or she cannot look to any external force or agency to help him attain nirvana. The moral lesson surrounding the Buddha's death emphasizes the significance of accepting impermanence, embracing mortality, living purposefully, and actively seeking enlightenment. These teachings encourage individuals to reflect on their lives, prioritize their values, and cultivate a deeper understanding of existence. Buddhism is often described as non-theistic. How is this different from atheism? Well, non-theism is a general term that describes a lack of belief in gods, while atheism is the active rejection of gods. Non-theism can be religious or non-religious, while atheism is often used as an identity label. The Buddha's last words were, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your own salvation with diligence." Now, this will be the last slide before I move on to the works cited and a short show and tell, and we can do questions, so bear with me just a sec. Friedrich Heiler, a German theologian and religious historian, says on Buddhism and the toleration of other faiths, "The Indian religions are a treasure of more than 2,000 years of tolerance. 250 years before Christ, King Ashoka, one of the most noble figures in history and the great promulgator of Buddhism, proclaimed to his subjects not only tolerance, but also love for other religions. He states in one of his most famous edicts carved into a rock, the divinely favored King Ashoka honors all sects, the ascetic as well as the local. He honors them with gifts and tributes of all kinds. But the divinely favored one does not lay so much weight upon gifts and tributes, but rather that in all religions there might be a growth in essence. The reason for this is that no praise for one's own religion or reproach of other religions should take place on unsuitable occasions. On the contrary, every opportunity ought to be taken to honor other religions. If one proceeds in this way, he furthers his own religion and renders good to other religions. Otherwise, he does harm to his own religion and reproaches other religions. And all of this out of admiration for his own religion. When he would magnify his own cause, he rather does all the more harm to his own religion. Unity alone profits, so that everyone will listen to and join the other religion. Heiler goes further. For decades, Western theology was represented by the opinion that ancient Buddhism was nothing more than an atheistic worldview, which led to the nothingness of nirvana, until penetrating studies established that Gautama Buddha taught a mystic way of salvation leading up to the same supreme value, which is the goal of all mysticism. One needs only to consider the picture of the Divine Mother with her child, as it appears to us from the dawn of time throughout the entire history of religions to the Madonna of the Far East, known as Guanyin. Guanyin is the Chinese female Buddhist incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of divine compassion and mercy. And these compare, if you look at pictures of Guanyin holding this child, these compare with the Christian pictures of Mother Mary and her child, to realize that Christian and non-Christian humanity alike have knelt before one and the same image. What is not eternal, said Gautama Buddha, is not worthy of man's rejoicing, not worthy that man should welcome it nor turn to it. This reality of the divine is ultimate love, which reveals itself to man and woman. The great heart of compassion is the inmost essence of the divine in Mahayana Buddhism, and this heart is open to all men and women. Just as the light of the moon is reflected in all kinds of water, the muddiest puddle, as in the crystal clear mountain lake and endless ocean, so this divine heart of love reveals itself in all levels of mankind. When Gautama Buddha had achieved perfect enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he withstood the temptation of remaining in undisturbed silence. Out of compassion for all beings, perishing without his message of the way to salvation, he resolved to preach to all the sacred truth disclosed to him. The Buddhist canon contains a hymn of brotherly or sisterly love, even as does the Christian New Testament. According to the words of Buddha, all works of merit do not have 1/16 the value of love. And we read in 1 Corinthians 13 that all the magnificent gifts of special grace are worthless and useless in comparison to the freely given, sacrificial, forgiving, and patient agape. This love has no limitations. As a mother protects her own child, her own son, with her love, so do the disciples of Buddha have boundless love for all beings. This universality of love finds its most wonderful expression in the formula of Buddhist canon concerning the meditation on love, compassion, and mutual joy. The contemplative monk lets the power of love, which fills his heart, spread throughout a heavenly realm, and then beyond a second, third, and fourth realm, above, beyond, sideways, in all directions, in all completeness. He lets the power of love that fills his heart stretch out over all the earth. Such is the extent of that great, wide, and boundless love, which is free from hate and malice. In later Mahayana Buddhism, this contemplative love takes on a strong, active character. Love becomes the selfless service to all beings. It is said, as the element of water brings growth to grass, shrubs, and herbs, so the pure Buddha novitiate gives to all beings through the testimony of his love. He or she makes the good qualities of all beings grow. The task to which he has dedicated himself or herself in a solemn vow is the conquest of all suffering in other living beings through his or her own vicarious suffering. I take upon myself the burden of all suffering. The salvation of all living things is my vow. I must take upon myself the whole load of suffering of all beings. I must bring the roots of the good to maturity so that all beings attain infinite happiness and unimagined gladness. One who becomes familiar with Buddhist lore is constantly struck by the purity, breadth, and depth of this love. But more astonishing still, this Buddhist love includes the love of the enemy, as also among Brahmins and Sufis. Buddha admonishes his disciples, even if, O monks, robbers, and murderers, would sever one's members with a double-toothed saw, one by one, that person, if his spirit be filled with rage, would not be practicing my religion. Also, in this case, then, you must beware. The mind must not be disturbed. We do not want to utter an evil word, but remain kind and compassionate, well-intentioned, without inward hate. And we want to penetrate this human being with the spirit of goodness, with a boundless and immeasurable spirit free from hostility and ill will. Thus, there is an ultimate and most profound unity of all high religions, including ancient Buddhism, which, in spite of its apparent anti-metaphysical agnosticism, reveals a mystic religion of redemption equal to the noblest forms of mysticism of all times and all religions. This unity exists in spite of the differences in doctrine and cultus. One not need to establish this unity artificially, but like a diver, simply lift up out of the deep that treasure which rests upon the ocean floor. Occasionally, however, such a precious treasure emerges on the surface of the water by itself and is visible to all. One of the most astounding facts of the history of religions, Max Mueller points out, is the admission of Buddha to the Roman calendar of saints. One of the most widespread medieval legends of the saints was that of Barlaam and Josaphat. It is said that the legend of Buddha entering into the Eastern as well as the Roman Church via Persia, Arabia, Syria, and Byzantium. Saint Josaphat, whose remembrance is annually observed in the calendar of the Greek Orthodox Church, as well as in the Martyrologium Romanum, is none other than the Bodhisattva. This occurrence has symbolic meaning. It proves the validity of the statement of the renowned traveler-explorer Marco Polo. If Buddha had been a Christian, he would have been a great saint of our Lord Jesus Christ. So good and pure was the life that he led. We find such saintly persons in great number in all high religions, and only because the living saints of various religions are so similar to each other could it happen that the founder of the greatest Eastern religion of redemption was admitted to the throng of canonized Christian saints. The Jewish Kabbalah and Hasidism, as well as Muslim Sufism, reveal a surprising similarity to Christian mysticism, and this mysticism in turn weaves a bond of unity around the related forms of mysticism which constitute the heart of the great Eastern religions of redemption: Taoism, Brahmanism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. The deeper our reverence for God, the deeper also must our reverence be for other religions. More than 2,000 years ago, King Ashoka, Buddha's zealous disciple, made it clear to his people that whoever honors another religion honors his own, and whoever disgraces another religion disgraces his own. His admonition still holds good for our day. He or she who has penetrated the mystery of religion will cease wanting simply to convert the believers among the other high religions. Moreover, his or her desire is twofold: to give and to receive, to represent the purest form of love of one's own beliefs to others, and in turn, to learn about the most intimate character of the beliefs of others. He or she does not want to conquer those religions, but unite with them. So thank you all once more for your time and attention this evening. That wraps up my presentation portion. I have a couple show and tell items for those who may appreciate while I show the works cited and recommended readings, and then I'll take questions from the audience if that works for all. And so show and tell, I'll start with, we talked about Tibetan Thangkas and Vajrayana Buddhism. One of my favorite artists of Tibetan Thangkas. Maybe, can you see me? Can everyone see me? Or is it just my screen?
Well, if you hold them up, we can see them.
Okay. There's these two books. They're both part of the Celestial Gallery is what it's called. This one is purely Thangkas. I'll open it quickly so you can get an idea of what's inside.
Okay. Oh.
You have these very ornate, intricate artworks that show different symbolic parts of Vajrayana Buddhism. This book goes into some of the mantras and deities, the bodhisattvas. We talked about Tara and Avalokiteshvara, and it kind of gives more of a textual understanding as well as the visual. So these two books are incredible resources for Buddhism in general, but also Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism specifically. All right. Next, I have, Romeo Shrestha is his name. And at the age of 5, 2 monks showed up to his house informing him that he was the reincarnation of a great religious artist. Imagine just 2 monks showing up at your parents' house when you were 5 and telling you what you were going to be for the rest of your life. But he dedicated himself to the rest, for the rest of his life. He worked in Kathmandu and has a school where he teaches others how to paint as he does. So they're both 24 inches tall, and they're both very vast, great works. Romeo Shrestha. The Vajra is a ritual tool in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism that symbolizes power and spiritual strength. A Vajra is the symbol of Vajrayana Buddhism. In the tantric traditions of Buddhism, the Vajra is a symbol for the nature of reality, or Sunyata, indicating endless creativity, potency, and skillful activity. The Khatvanga is a ritual staff, a tantric Vajra staff, and is a ritual instrument held in the crook of the left arm of advanced tantric Vajrayana Buddhist practitioners during ceremonies. There's a lot of symbolism in the Khatvanga, but I won't go into that in this presentation. Tibetan music bowls, often called singing bowls, are a kind of bell used in Tibetan Buddhist meditation. Instead of hanging upside down and being struck, the bowl sits upright, and a wooden puja stick is used to vibrate the rim of the bowl, making its distinct sound. You can hear it like that. Kind of hard to do while I'm holding and talking. So, Tibetan singing bowl.